To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Hey, I'm Eric Gunn. You might know me from Good Boy, Warcorns, Franklin and Ghost, and you're watching The Experience.
Hey everybody, it's Jenna from Space Cadets. I'm filling in for Miss Jen today, and welcome to Talking Shop. So we do have our first guest, Ryan Ellsworth from Scout Comics here. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Doing good. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Ready to experience some comics.
Yes, some awesome comics. So, did you kind of want to tell us any of like the big projects or anything that you're working on right now that people can pick up in stores?
Well, I have one project in total. That's the only one I'm working on now, which is North Bend.
Okay.
And I guess that's the main one you wanted to talk about, or?
Yeah, definitely.
Coming out. Okay. So that's coming out in like 2 days, Wednesday, and it'll be season 2, issue 1. So technically it's like issue 6, but the Scout loves to do the season 2.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're just picking up the second arc, and it's going to be pretty cool.
Dope. So is this is it going to pick up right off from where the first arc ended?
Yeah, it actually, there's like seconds in between the ending of the first arc and the beginning of the second arc. So you're slipping right in there. So hopefully you read the last ones, but if you didn't, it's okay, because I tried to write it in a way that it's a good place to get like into it again. So
I feel really bad. I only got the chance to read the first issue. So I do this thing where I read the first issue and then I wait for trades to come out. So I haven't picked up my trade yet, but I did get to read the first one.
Understandable. There's a lot of, I'm very much in that boat too, where it's just easier to not keep track of all the comics that are happening and then just get the trade, and you get like a nice little thing to hold it all together.
Yes.
Read it all at once. It's nice to binge it like that. What's that?
I'm a big fan of trades. I have about 4 of these bookshelves full of trades.
Yeah, you need a wider camera. You get all
yes, it's a lot. It's a whole wall of just trades, and then behind the scene is even more boxes of trades. And I like to pick up first ones. I usually pick up my favorite cover, and then I'm like, oh, I really, really like this. I can't wait for the trade. And I always add the trade to my pull list at my LCS.
Yep, it's a good call, but an expensive call. But
yeah,
it's either way. It's nice to get to support the creator, whether you're doing one thing or the other. Either way helps. So
definitely. So one of my favorite questions to ask people is, do you remember your first comic book shop?
My first comic book shop, like experience, or
like the first comic book shop that you went to and like you bought something and you were like, oh, comics, I'm going to get comics.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm 37. I don't probably look that old, but this was my first comics experience. Is probably back when like grocery stores sold comics still, and like you could go into Walden Books in the mall and they had comics. And like I think probably the first comics I got into were like the Simpsons comics and like stuff like that. Like I just remember going to the grocery store and like sitting on the tile floor while my mom would like go off and push the cart around, and I'd just be sitting there reading Simpsons comics.
Yeah.
And then I got into like, the Spider-Mans and the Supermans and the whatnot and X-Men, collecting garage sale stuff. And then, of course, like your Sunday comics, I was really into Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I love Calvin Hobbes.
Oh,
Mine
yeah.
was I went to Brookshire Brothers Show You here in Texas because I'm in my 30s also, and at Brookshire Brothers they always had the Archies up on this spinny rack thing. So
They have the what now?
you remember those metal wire spinny rack things that they had?
Sure.
Yeah, it was those.
Yeah, the spinning racks. That's what they had at the grocery stores too, with all the comics on there. Man, I wish they still did that.
Oh man, I think Walmart has started getting some indie comics. Like usually, I find them over like towards the Pops and stuff. You can find like an end cap of just like random comics, and you're like, "What? That's so
Really?
cool!"
Wow, I've never seen that at Walmart. That is crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool seeing how much like the industry is taking over everything.
Well, I won't argue with that. That's for sure.
Is there any books that you're reading right now that you want everybody to know about?
Besides my own book, you mean?
Well, everybody needs to pick it up, definitely.
Yeah, so what is it? There's one coming out that I'm excited about called I'm gonna butcher the name. It's like Vengeance by Image Comics. It's like a Tokyo crime. Let me pull out the Google. Sorry,
It's always right when you want to remember and talk about it is right when you forget it, right?
this is bad video etiquette, but I have to get the name right. A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance.
Ooh, yeah. I put that in my pull box. I'm super excited to see that too.
That's one I'm pretty stoked about. That looks up my alley. I like a good crime comic. So that one looks cool. There's some Swamp Dogs from Image Comics, looks pretty cool. Just
Definitely.
the art alone looks pretty cool. That Texas Blood.
Yes.
That's pretty good.
I ended up picking up that one because anything that says Texas, and I'm like, you know what? We're in Houston. I wanna try and support anything that says Texas. And since then, I've been like hooked on it. It's like, oh, don't know what it is about the art style in it that just like pulls you in.
Yeah, if it's that, it's got kind of that criminal style going for it. I'm always a pretty good fan of the criminal books myself. So, what about you? What do you?
I think I recently picked up the trade for Unicorn that was done by. I think that was also done by Scout. Hold on, I've got it.
Oh yeah, Unicorn. That's the fantasy one.
Yes, this one right here, done by Scout also.
Yeah,
I always keep an eye out for kids books. I have 17 nieces and nephews, and they always like to come to my house on a weekend. So it's like I need to have stuff for them too.
Yeah. Is that good for kids? I haven't read it.
Yes, it's done by the Scoot side, so it's good for all ages, and it's really cool to see. It's about a kid who comes to a horse farm, finds a horse. It's not really a horse; it's actually a unicorn. Ha ha ha! And then the art style really dries. Like it really brings me in. There's just something about bright, pretty colors.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, shiny. Maybe in my 30s, but I'm still a squirrel.
Still a squirrel?
Yes, where it's like, ooh, shiny color.
Oh yeah, shiny.
All right, so what was your inspiration for North Bend?
So, like I said, I'm always like down for a good crime story. So I had I'm a big fan of like the slow burn type stories like you see on FX and like The Americans and Fargo and stuff like that. I'm always trying to create stuff like that, and so that's the kind of style I was going for.
Okay.
And for this story, I'd probably say it's something like The Americans meets Memento. So I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's like an older Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Where,
it's one of those movies you got to watch twice.
Yep, at least twice.
At least.
Time moves backwards in that movie. And North Bend kind of cribs the structure of that, where there's a section in each issue where time's moving backwards, and then it kind of loops around to the end. So you can actually start at the end of the series and read the beginning of each one and go forward in time all the way to the back. So it's kind of freaky that way, but It's good stuff.
Oh, so I got asked a question. Your thought experiment. So it's to ask about your crime sci-fi anthology of thought experiment.
Oh yeah, we got a deep digger over here.
So you want to tell us more about it?
So you said there was a question about it, or just what is it?
He wants to know more about it.
Oh, okay. So Thought Experiment is just an anthology that I started a few years ago. And it's like mostly in the crime sci-fi kind of genre. And I think there's only like 2 or 3 stories that I've written for that. I haven't had a lot of time to write for it recently, but the first story is like called Witness, and that's the first thing I ever wrote pretty much.
Okay.
It's just like a short story about some kids that go to buy fireworks and then pick up a kind of drifter guy, and he wants them to take him to like a crack house pretty much, and then stuff goes bad from there. The other story is called I've Been to the Valley, and it's about 2 brothers who were it's set in the Alaskan Yukon in like the 1800s. It's kind of like a trippy sci-fi thing. 2 brothers go missing after searching for gold, and then the dad goes off to find them, and weirdness ensues in the wilderness. And then I have a couple other things written, but nothing complete yet.
Okay. And is this going to be like a project that you plan on like keeping going for a while, or is this like a project that you see in your head as like, and you see an ending to it?
When I started, I pictured like maybe 8 or so in my head that I could put together for like an anthology book or something, maybe do a Kickstarter. And now that I'm done with North Bend, maybe there's time to start revisiting that kind of stuff. It's kind of hard to find the time for me lately. I'm just like so busy with stuff lately, and I kind of like to have a different artist for each one too. So there's like the work involved in finding artists all the time and stuff. But we'll see how it goes. I definitely like to do a couple more at least.
Okay. All right. So you said North Bend was your first project, right?
Yeah. If you don't count with like the short stuff for Thought Experiment, then North Bend is pretty much the first. Yep.
So how was that bringing it to Scout versus trying to like find other ways to get it out there?
So it actually started on Kickstarter. And I had done a successful #1. Then I did I had gotten up to like issue 3 or 4, and then the project failed on Kickstarter, and I had kind of decided I was done with it. And Scout actually approached me about bringing it to them and having a way to like finish the story. So that was really cool.
That is cool. So you like somebody discovered it on Kickstarter and was like, "Hey, Scout, do this." And Scout was like, "Hey, let's do this."
Yeah, James Hake, who's like the president, I got an email like, I don't know, I want to say like 1 a.m. one time. And he's like, "Hey, your comic looks pretty cool. You want to talk about publishing at Scout?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So James, we have James to thank or to blame, either one, for the existence of my comic here.
I feel like Scout's really good at that. They've picked up a couple of Kickstarters of like different campaigns and been like, "Hey, let's get you even further out there." And I really like what they're doing with that. Yeah,
there is like a lot of overlap from like Scout and Kickstarter, it seems like Frank on the Farm, White Ash started on Kickstarter. I know a lot of those started on there, and there's some big popular projects on Kickstarter that deserve to be in shops because there's a lot of quality stuff on there, so it's a good idea.
And I think that's a main reason why I love Miss Jen's shop, why I ended up working there, is she's like, "Hey, tell me about Kickstarters you guys like, because I like supporting indies." And we were like, "Do this one." And she would like email them and be like, "Hey, do you have one for a retailer so I can buy all your stuff?" And people are like, "Yeah." Yeah, let's do this.
So you probably said this at the beginning, and then I didn't remember, but you're not Miss Jen.
I am not.
Or
I'm Jenna.
Jenna.
Yes.
And you're not.
Miss Jen is at ExxonCon right now.
She's at a con.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're
Yeah,
just like,
the wires got mixed up, and like last minute she was like, "Oh no, what do I do?" And I was like, "It's okay, Miss Jen, I'll help."
okay. So how many videos have you done? Do you do a lot of these type of things?
So I usually I'm mostly like the social media side, and anytime we have events, I sit in this chair at this desk at this computer for like 12 hours a day.
Oh wow.
Yeah, for our post-month 6 months anniversary, Saturday was 12-hour days of interview, and then Sunday we did another 8 hours. So yeah, it's usually what I'm doing is marathon talks.
That's some very rigorous interviewing right there.
Yes, it's so much fun to me though. It's I think my favorite part is hiding my face while I let people go and just like shove a whole sandwich in my mouth and just be like,
So you can just kind of get your food in while you're doing your marathon video.
Yes, but I have so much fun. I love talking with people.
Yeah, if you want to eat a sandwich on screen right now, that's fine with me.
I just had a salad.
Oh, okay.
Can't really call it a salad. It was more like it was a fried chicken and sesame seeds and hard-boiled egg, and it was like a chef's salad minus the tomatoes. So it was delicious.
It's hard to eat a good salad on a video like that because it's salad's going everywhere. You got the crunch factor.
It becomes a ASMR of food and comics.
Yeah. So we might have to, relabel the video if you're doing something like that.
Salad and comics. I love it.
I think you're onto something, Jenna variant, Miss Jen.
Oh my goodness.
You're onto something with salad and comics.
Salad and comics. Yes.
You have some guests on. You both eat salad together. Talk about comics.
Doesn't always have to be salad. Sometimes it can be like chili burgers. Oh yes. What is your favorite sort of like guilty pleasure food? I love food. I cook all the time. So I always end up talking about it. So what is your favorite like food that you just like you're done working or you're about to start working and you're like, oh, I need something to eat. You just like you grab something like this is going to give me the thing I need to finish this project.
I'm a big chocolatier, you could say. I decided to go the chocolatier route instead of chocoholic. You think I said chocoholic, but it's probably wrong. Chocolatiers make chocolate, and I don't make it. I just eat it.
I think chocolatiers have to like at least taste it to know what it tastes like. So I feel like they would be too.
Yeah, and you just don't get to. Anyway, it seems like a fun idea to call myself that. And I do like chocolate. I can't go a day really without eating some chocolate. Like cookies, brownie, cake, like I just got to have that stuff. And it doesn't feel anything good, but it'll get me going to the next day.
And that's all we need. So we do have a question here. We have, what is your dream project? If there's like an artist or a favorite character that you would want to work with.
My dream project? Oh no, like my dream is to have people read the stuff that I've written now, at least, like just having recognition for what I've written, having people buy the comic and talk about like, because so much work goes into it, like North Bend, and how much all the work and all the money and all of the time. My dream would just be for people to as many people as possible to read it, to get some kind of conversation going around it. That's what really makes it worth it to me, is just to hear people like talk about it. And not too bad when people like it as well, but talking about it at least is good.
Yeah, definitely. And is there like a favorite character you would ever want to like work for? Like Superman, you would want to change Superman, or like any like type of character that you would want to do?
I've never really pictured myself like a mainstream guy, so it's hard to say. Like
Okay.
if if they approach me and they're like, "We want you to write, you know, the Hulk or whatever," it'd be hard to say no. But I feel like I couldn't. Like what story hasn't been told by now? I don't know if I could do Batman justice.
Yeah.
If like maybe I could think of something. Maybe Batman would be the thing I would do because he's the closest thing to like a crime comic, I guess. He
Okay.
has like the detective. It's like it's really like a mystery story, right? Like you got your criminals, and there's been a crime that's been committed, and he was doing the detective work, and like so he doesn't really have any superpowers. He's just kind of a badass.
Yeah.
So Batman would be, if they said anything you want, I'd probably go Batman. But it's not going to happen.
It'd be so cool to really dive into the like criminal, like detective part of it.
Yeah, I think that's what the new movie's doing too. So I'm kind of hoping Robert Pattinson will do it.
I hope he
So
definitely Heath Ledger's us. I really want him to. I'm
I want
sorry.
it.
I
Yeah,
always like because Heath Ledger, everybody didn't expect him to be such a great Joker, and then he was, and it was so amazing. And now I kind of like, he's one of those people that people are like, I don't know, and I'm like, I hope he comes in and just like kills it.
I know, and it's a tough guy to follow too, because the legacy of Heath Ledger, and then everyone seems like every time there's a new Batman, someone's got to kind of one up it almost. But
Yeah,
can you really?
we'll just have to see.
We'll see.
Who was your favorite actor who portrayed Batman?
My favorite actor who was Batman?
Yeah.
Who's your favorite actor?
Uh, I kind of have to Adam West. It was Adam West.
Oh, you're going OG, huh?
Yeah. Where I grew up in the 80s and in the 90s, our TV was at least 20 or 30 years behind everybody else. And so everything we got had to be translated into Russian. And once it was already like 10 or 20 years later than what everybody here in the States was. So we were getting Adam West in the 80s and 90s. While everybody else was getting the movies and stuff.
Okay, so I got to go George Clooney on it because I got the McDonald's mug, the glass mug with Batman. You probably don't remember this, but they used to have, every time a big movie would come out, McDonald's would come out with the glass mug.
Yes.
And it was all like icy looking. And the Batman mug, I think that was Batman Forever, the Batman Forever era.
I think so.
And so just for that, I'll go George Clooney.
All right. So we do have another question here from Sean Butler. Have you ever experienced writer's blocks, and what do you do to find inspiration to get past
that? Writer's block, I have a hard time. Sometimes I'll have a hard time coming up with an idea that I think is interesting. And, that's the hardest time to write for me, is when like I'll have an idea and I'm trying to force myself to write the idea. And it's like, I hate writing or I don't like this idea that much, so I don't like writing. And like, why am I even writing a thing that I don't think is that interesting? Like, someone else isn't going to find that interesting if I don't. And so like, when that situation happens, I know it's probably I'm writing the wrong thing. And then you kind of got to go back to that well of like, what made you want to write in the first place? What made you excited about writing? So if your writer's block probably comes when that well is at the low zone, you got to fill it back up. So go back to the things that filled that well up with writing juice.
So kind of like going back to your basics, going back to like the origin of what made you get into what you were doing?
Yeah, just, the things that made you excited, that gave you inspiration to write.
Okay, all right.
Consume the media.
right, dope. The Burger King cups. I always got the Walmart cups. So yeah, I remember the cups.
The Walmart cups.
Oh, not the Walmart. The McDonald's. Our McDonald's was in Walmart. So yes.
Oh.
They always had
we have
they had
Subway in
glass
ours.
cups,
So.
and then they had like the kid cups, like the plastic cup, but they also had the glass cups too.
Oh yeah. Do they still do those then?
I think they do the kids' little plastic ones for like big movies and stuff, but I don't know if they do the glass cups anymore.
Okay. I haven't been to McDonald's for like, well, I haven't been to McDonald's willingly for like 20 years.
Willingly. I think that's my favorite part.
Yeah. Right? That's how it goes.
I think I only go there for the McRib, and that's like once a year that they do it.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with the McRib. They're trying to artificially decrease the supply. They know people are going to buy it.
Yes, trying to do that. Oh, we're going to have a bad quarter. Let's push it out for this like week. And
We need
everybody's like,
something new, but we can't have something new unless we take it away. So get rid of the McRib. We'll bring it back later. It's news.
yeah. They were trying to do this one thing for Halloween. It was supposed to be back just for Halloween. And then they were like, "No, what? Let's leave it up for let's just leave it up there for the week."
The McRib.
Yes. The lines, every McDonald's around here was wrapped around the building. And they were like, "You know what? We'll extend it for the week." And you're just like, really?
It's hard to imagine a McRib that good that would warrant a line around the building. That's me though. I don't
I
understand.
got it super early and I put mustard on mine and it's just like, okay, this is good.
I'll take your word for it on that.
All right. So what social medias and where can people find you?
My socials mostly happen on Twitter,
Okay.
which isn't very often, to be honest. So I'm very poor at social media. I'll get on there and like tell people what's happening and then I jump out and that's about it. But anyway, I see you got a link right there. Yeah. Twitter.com, Ryan Ellsworth _. So if you want to talk to me for some reason, I don't know why you'd want to, but that's where I'm at.
All right. So it looks like it is time for our break. So we'll see everybody back here in just a minute. Bye.
Today's comics market is ripe with new titles by creators who are determined to get their books into your hands. My name is Henri Compen. For the last decade, I've been making and selling my own creator-owned comics and dealing as a collector in live sales. My signature series, Yi Sun Shin, is the book that cannot be defeated in battle and has over 250,000 copies in print. Now I'm taking comics to the next level and laying the groundwork for my fellow creators to get their voices heard so they can connect directly with you. This is your chance to engage live with top comic book talent and get your comics signed without having to wait in long lines or pay any fees. But remember, we only have a limited amount of their books in stock, so always remember to call it as you see it.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
watching the experience.
Hi guys, welcome back to part 2 of our talking shop with me, Jenna, the variant 626 of Miss Jen. Today we're going to bring in Matthew Rosenberg. Hi.
Hello.
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we are. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Doing good. How are you doing today?
I am doing good. A little bit of a stressful day, but other than that, doing all right.
Oh no. Well, I hope in the next 30 minutes that we got together, we can take it chill.
Yes. I think it'll be good.
All right. So you have a couple of books coming up this week that you wanted to tell us about, or any books? What's your most recent book that you want to tell us about?
Well, I had a couple books last week. I wrote, I'm writing Joker Presents Puzzle Box for DC, and issue 4 of that came out, which is pretty exciting. And then I also write fill-in issues of the other Joker book. So I did an issue with Francesco Francavilla and James Tynion, and that just came out in a really nice hardcover that I just got. And then before that, I launched 2 new books, DC versus Vampires and Task Force Z. Oh, there they are. I wrote those. And then this week coming up, hopefully, my first issue of my new Image book is coming out. It's called What's the Furthest Place from Here?
Yes.
It should be coming out. I know that Diamond is having some hiccups this week, but I think it's still coming out.
All right, so tell us more about what's the furthest place from here, which is funny. I actually said that the other day when we were in line for something trick-or-treating, and I'm like, we need to go away. The furthest place from here.
Sure, yeah. So what's the furthest place from here is it's me and my buddy Tyler Boss, who I did a book called 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank with. We got back together. This is actually a book we've been working on for a while, for a couple years now. Really, in some form or another, we've been working on it since 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank ended. And it's something we're just really passionate about and really excited about. It is a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age story about gangs of children wandering the wastelands of America after the end of the world. And when one of the gang goes missing, they have to decide what to do. And so it's sort of it's a little bit Lord of the Flies, a little bit Lord of the Rings, it's a little bit John Hughes, it's a little bit John Carpenter. It's sort of all these things we love kind of thrown together, if that makes sense.
Yes. I'm sorry. I have 17 nieces and nephews, and they're all at my house at least once a month together. And
Sure.
That's almost a full acre of yard and lake, and that's pretty much what they do.
Yeah.
They're just like this little gang of kids that just go off and play. And if one of them just doesn't show up, they're just like, well, we better go find William.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like this weird post-apocalyptic story where there's no adults, it's just kids. But it's also like, for me, like I grew up in New York City, and I think I grew up at a time where there was sort of just a lot of people who had, 2 parents who worked or were very busy. And so a lot of me and my friends were kind of latchkey kids, and we're these sort of gangs of kids who would wander around and like get in trouble and go on these adventures. And you'd leave your house, and by 10 blocks further south, there'd be 6 of you. And then you'd just sort of be picking people up like a cartoon snowball in an avalanche.
Yes.
So yeah, it is. It's a fantasy story, but it is based in reality.
I love it. It's so cool.
Yeah.
All of us 80s kids. I think we were all doing that as kids.
Yeah. I think it's funny because it's very like a lot of the fiction of that time were sort of influenced by a lot of that stuff of like, the suburbia and Repo Men, and like there's a lot of these like the Warriors, of just like stories of just like gangs of children and stuff running around. And that was a very dystopian view of the world in the 80s, but it was also like somewhat grounded in a sense of reality that like I've always really liked, and sort of I look back on fondly. So
Okay. So we did have a question a little bit up here.
Okay.
So Sean asked, did you like, here it is. He wants to know, did you like writing for DC and Marvel or doing original work for indie companies? Or do you prefer a healthy mix of both?
I like both. They're very different. Which I know when I was coming up in comics, and I used to like always obsessively read interviews with all my favorite writers and watch interviews with them, and they'd always say like, "Oh, they're very different," and I was always like, "That's so pretentious. Like it's just writing," but they are very different. It turns out that those people knew what they were talking about, and I, as a obnoxious younger person, did not. But yeah, I like them both. They're the way I described it recently, I said, like writing for Marvel or DC is like you get in a car and you have a map, and it's the adventure you go on, is the destination, you know where you're going. And writing your own stuff is getting in a car and just driving, and you don't know where you're going. And I said that to someone, and they were like, "Oh, so that sounds much better." And I was like, no, most people who get in cars know where they're going and have a destination. Like it is actually the preferred thing to do. I was like, but they're very different, and they can both be fun and they can both be terrifying in their own way. But I really do like doing both. I think that the hard part, once you navigate the hard part of doing Marvel and DC work, which is, you're a small cog in a very large machine. Once you understand that and sort of are comfortable with that and understand the limitations of that, but also the benefits of that, then you're pretty good to go. If you get that and it doesn't kill you, then it's a pretty fun job.
That's cool. So there's one more question that I like to ask everybody that I talk to. Do you remember your first comic book shop, like the first place you went for comic books?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up across the street from a comic book store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It was Big Apple Comics in New York City. It was one block from my house. So it was not only the first comic shop I went to, but it was actually the first like place I was allowed to go to on my own, because I could go outside and my mom could watch from our apartment window to make sure I wasn't hit by a car crossing the street. And I just had to cross one street and I was fine. So once I made it across the avenue, I could go there. And it was like, it was great to shop. I love it very, it doesn't exist anymore, but I really loved it. It was upstairs from a really good, greasy hamburger and milkshake place. And that was just like my, if not, I would say every day, but that's not true, because I wasn't eating lunch at a diner every day, but like 2 or 3 days a week I was in the comic shop buying a comic, buying 2 comics. Like I would go and order a burger and a milkshake, go upstairs, pick out some comics for 20 minutes, come down, get my food. And I was like, I made the joke once. I was like, that's as formulative a building as has ever existed in a person's life. It's that for me. It's just like,
Sounds
the
like
stuff
paradise.
the stuff I was into when I was 7 that I'm still into now. It's like, pretty much just set the course for where I am. So
sounds like a paradise is what you got to experience.
Yeah, it was the best.
Oh my goodness. So that leads me into the other question I like to ask everybody. What is your favorite guilty pleasure food?
Guilty pleasure food. Wow. I have a weird thing. I pretty much just only eat crap. Like I don't eat great. So it's all like, I'm not like eating salads and then one day a week I'm going to eat chicken fingers. It's kind of like, no, I just kind of eat chicken fingers all the time. My favorite guilty pleasure food, I mean, I can't really count it, but like chocolate milk. I just drink chocolate milk like a lot. And that's like sort of my go-to, but I don't actually feel any guilt about that. I think like, it's pretty, I don't like the way the cows are treated. I don't love that. But once you get past that, which I did a long time ago. You know, it's where we are. So yeah, I guess that's my answer. Is chocolate milk.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, mine's tacos. Just
Tacos. Okay.
tacos. I love beefy fajita tacos. I live
Sure.
in Houston, so I can go down to the street corner with the guy with the cart and ask for a couple of tacos, and he hands them to
Yeah.
me, and it's heaven.
Yeah. That's the dream, I think.
All right, so we do have a question here. How did you come up with the idea to put a soundtrack to your new book?
Yeah. So what's the furthest place from here? There's a deluxe version that's going to have 7-inch records with every issue. So that serve as the sort of like soundtrack score. It's kind of it's a funny thing because it's something I wanted to do a long time ago. And my first books, I did a book called We Can Never Go Home and Four Kids Walking to a Bank. And I did both of those at Black Mask. And I talked to them a bunch about doing it. And they were pretty excited about it. But logistically, they were like, it's a nightmare what you're trying to do. And I was like, no, it's cool. And they were like, it is cool, but it's a nightmare. So it's something that I was always trying to think of. And then I sort of put on the back burner. And then we started doing this book, which what's the first place from here? Like the kids in it, the gang, live in a record store and they like worship these records. So music has a big component in the story. And you know, we didn't really think more about that other than just like, I like to write about music. Music's really important to me. But then we hit a point where when the pandemic hit and shops were closed and everything was paused, we sort of paused the book and we're like, well, what, you know, when we come back with the book, like we want to do something that feels special and cool and gets people into comic shops who'd never been there before, gets people excited about them, gets maybe new people reading comics. Like, what can we do? And the record thing just sort of made sense to me at that point. And, you know, we started reaching out to a bunch of bands that Tyler and I love that are, you know, big influences for us and stuff we listened to while we were making the book. And like, would you be down with this? And, you know, just like we were all stuck at home, all these bands who are normally touring and out on the road were all sitting in their houses. So we were just like, yeah, just, you know, like record something and we'll put it out. And then, you know, we're not a business. We're not trying to make money off of this. Like, we'll give all the money to charity. We just want to do something cool that gets people a cool thing that'll make them feel good and put them in a comic shop. And so all these bands were really excited about it. And so that's how it came together. And then it turns out that the wonderful folks at Black Mask were correct. And it is a logistical nightmare to put out records with the comics, but here we are. So yeah, that's the short version of a year plus of a lot of sleepless nights of work. But yeah.
Yes, comics. We love them. Lots of sleepless nights.
It's true. It is true.
Oh my goodness. And then, so somebody asked if you can name a couple of bands that you have on the soundtrack.
Yeah. So I guess we've announced the first 3, so I can talk about those. They're all sort of leaning towards like punk, indie rock kind of bands. That's the kind of stuff we listen to. So the first one is a band from Southern California called Joyce Manor, who are like this great power pop quartet that I've just always loved, and they're an amazing band. And they were really enthusiastic about it. And then actually the title of the book comes from a line from a band called Jawbreaker, who are one of my favorite bands of all time. And they have a song called Accident Prone. And What's the Furthest Place from Here is the first line of that song. And so Blake Schwarzenbach, who is the frontman, singer, songwriter, guitarist of Jawbreaker, we reached out to him when we were working on the book, and we're like, we want to call the book this line. It's, you know, is that cool with you? And he was so awesome and so cool that when we came back with the idea for the records, he was like, oh, I'd love to do a song. And so he has a song on the first 7-inch, which is such an honor and such a big deal for us. The second one is a band called Screaming Females from New Jersey, who are like this awesome trio, and a band called Warriors, who are just awesome, like sort of power pop punk band. And then the third 7-inch is my very good friends in a band called Restorations from Philadelphia, who are kind of like this like melodic post-hardcore thing that's really, really great. And they do an REM cover and it's so good. And then a band from Philadelphia called Nothing, who are kind of like droney, shoegaze kind of stuff. That are,
I know.
yeah. So Nothing, it's Nothing and Restorations on the third one. And yeah, it's I'm really excited. All the bands are doing, recording new stuff for these, and the songs have been awesome. Yeah. We're already we're working on. I mean, the whole first arc has them, and we're figuring out. You have to, when you do stuff like this, ask more bands than you can use.
Yeah.
Because people just like, can't get in a studio, especially these days, like things can't come together. They, can't get permission from their label, blah, blah, blah. And so we reached out to a lot of bands, and bands keep sort of circling back and being like, hey, actually we can do this thing now. And so we don't want to turn anyone down. So me and Tyler are like trying to figure out how many 7 inches we're going to do. Like initially we were like, we're just going to do the first arc, the first 6 issues. And now I was like, well, 2 of my favorite bands of all time, so they would do the 7th one. So we're going to definitely do 7. And now we're just like, I don't know, like amazing bands keep being like, yeah, we'll do it. And we're like, well, all right, maybe we'll keep going. So
sounds like you and I need to have a sesh about music, because you're naming some bands that I like, naming some bands I know Kyle likes. And it's just like, we need to, yes, definitely. Yes, I love Screaming Fields. Okay. Okay. I got to focus. Okay. I love music. One of my favorite bands right now is Meet Me at the Altar. Like, it's this cool punk band with the female singer. I love it so much. Like, I listen to it all the time when I'm cleaning or anything. So yeah, punk bands, 80s, 90s. Yes. All about
I'm really excited. Like, we've had a lot of the fans of the bands are like, reach out to me and reach out to the bands and are like, how do I get this? And I'm like explaining them to, like, you call your local comic shop and tell them you want it and pre-order, and like, I've probably sent out, like, in the past 2 months, like 100 different emails and DMs and messages of just like comic shop locator link. Just be like, this is how you find your local comic shop. And that's super cool to me. And like, the fans of the bands are very excited about, like, this is different for them. This is something that's cool. So it's been really fun to like deal with that for sure.
I've always loved mixing music with comics. You just got to have that music going, and then it really gets you into the mood for whichever comic you're reading. Is there like a certain soundtrack that you like to listen to when you're like writing or when you're reading?
No, I jump around a lot. I tend to, when I write dialogue, I can't listen to stuff with lyrics. And I know that's true for a lot of writers, and a lot of my peers listen to film soundtracks. And I can't do that because it's always like, then I start thinking like the movie. Like, if you listen to the Indiana Jones soundtrack, like, you're going to do like swashbuckling adventure stuff. So I listen to just like anything that's instrumental. I'll jump around. I listen to like a lot of like instrumental, like post rock stuff, like, Mogwai and Explosions in the Sky and Russian Circles and bands like that. But I listen to a lot of classical and a lot of jazz, and I'm really all over the place. The only stuff that if I know something like super well, like the back of my hand, I can listen to it, because then the vocals like don't matter. Like, if it's just like, so like old Taylor Swift records, I can listen to while I work, because it's just like, well, the lyrics aren't distracting, because it's just like all a wall of music. But other than that, I kind of jump around a lot. It's very chaotic in what I listen to, but I'm always listening to music. I listen to music while I write for 12 hours a day. So
so does that really help, like that chaos that's going on around you? Does that really help you with like finding inspiration for like news stories or continuing stories?
Yeah, I think it does. I think especially in the past year or two, I've always been someone who like needs to look at other art to like be inspired and sort of chase that, like. And, whether it's like, it can be all sorts of things. It's going to museums and galleries or like going to movies or watching TV. And all that stuff is super important to me. I've sort of not been doing most of that. So my influx of sort of outside stimuli that I rely on is basically just reading comics every night and listening to music. So I'll read a few issues every night and listen to records all day. And that's sort of, without that, I feel like, I feel really drained sort of artistically. It's sort of, it's weird because when you talk about like the inspiration of music or like comics or film or whatever, people tend to think it's a very linear thing, that like you read a Batman comic and it makes you write Batman, like inspired to write Batman. And it's not like, my brain doesn't process things like that, but it is like chasing sort of ideas. And like, you can look at a beautiful painting and sort of, it makes you feel something. And you're like, how do I put that in a story? How do I transliterate that into a script? And that's really what I'm always going after. And so that is also why the music is so chaotic, because I'm trying to like chase all these different emotions of like writing horror stuff and comedy and action and all these different things. You sort of need different sounds to get there.
All right, so we did have Sean ask another question. What comic did you read that made you want to go write comics?
What comic did I read that made me want to write comics?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I feel like growing up, I've read comics my whole life, and just been a huge comic fan since I could learn to read. Before I learned to read, I loved comics. But I never thought about making comics, really. The two that I point to the most as like, these are the things that made me want to make comics and make sense of it. It's two creators' works that really influenced me a lot. And one is a very sort of literal path in my life, which is Steve Niles, who wrote 30 Days a Night and Criminal Macabre and all this stuff that I love. I was a big fan of Steve. I still am a big fan of Steve's work. And then someone told me in passing, they were like, "Oh, he used to play bass in a bunch of hardcore bands from DC." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. Like, what bands was he in?" And someone was like, "Oh, he was in a band called Grey Matter." And I loved Grey Matter. Like, they broke up before when I was a little kid, so I never saw them, but like I have their records and I love them. And I was like, Steve Niles was in Grey Matter and now he makes these comics. And it like was the first ever connective tissue I had between, like, I knew a lot of people in bands. I toured with bands. I hung out with bands. And then there was like a line to the people who made comics. It had never occurred to me. I didn't know anyone who made comics. And so Steve was a big person of me being like, oh, you can just do this. Like, you can just make comics. That's weird. Like, that had never occurred to me in a real way. It's just always been a part of my life. And so like thinking about the process of it or the career of it didn't make sense to me. And the other one to me was that was really interesting, but Brian Bendis' stuff, and specifically like Powers and his crime stuff, like Powers and Torso and Jinx and Goldfish, like those books I was just obsessed with. And I was like, I didn't know you could make comics like that. I didn't know comics like that existed, and I just was so obsessed with them. And that, coupled with the idea that like Steve Niles was someone who could just make them, I was like, maybe I could do this. This is something I can't get out of my head, and it's so exciting to me, and also now seems possible. And that was like a perfect storm of me just being like, I guess I'm going to try and make comics and figure out how to do that.
Yeah. And then we have time for one more question. Let's do this
Right.
one. Hi, what made you want to write a book with Jason Todd as a main character?
Okay, yeah. Jason is, I was at Marvel for a long time. I was at Marvel for 4 or 5 years. And I sort of, I really found a love for writing the screw ups is the nice way to put it. The
outside people. Yeah.
yeah. Like, I love Captain America. He's great. He's awesome, but like, that's not a character that speaks to me in the same way. And when I came over to DC, I had a conversation with Ben Abernathy, who's the head of the Batman group. And he was like, what do you want to write? And I was like, well, Batman stuff. And he was like, that's what everyone says. Like, what specifically? Like, we have a lot. And I was like, Jason. Like, Jason was the first name I said, because to me, I think he is someone who is so interesting in the history of who he was and what's happened to him and who he's become. You really get this sense of a journey, and like, you know, certain people are a constant in comics. Like Bruce Wayne is kind of always going to be Bruce Wayne-y, and you know, like Captain America is always going to be Captain America or whatever. Jason is a character who has real arcs. He has real, like, he's still discovering who he is and figuring it out, and like, you know, the Jason of 20 years ago is not the Jason of now. And I would like to think that the Jason in 20 years will not be. And that's really fun as a writer, to get to be a part of something that's evolving. And like, you're seeing it now just in just like what Chip Zdarsky was doing, what Chip and Eddie Barros were doing in Batman Urban Legends. Like, they were taking Jason in really interesting places. And it's that as a writer is really fun. But more than that, like, I just love him as a character. He's just such a tragic figure in comics. He's the Robin that Batman failed, and he's come back, and you know, he's broken, and he's trying to figure out how to fix it and how to make himself right and make the world right, and you know, protect other people from what happened to him, but also like while working out what happened to him. And I think he's just such a fascinating, beautiful character. I really love Jason so much. So like, he's always been top of my list of characters to try and get a hold of. And luckily, like in Task Force Z, we have enough runway that I was like, I want to do a slow, long Jason story where you start to see who he is and what he's becoming and how he's processing things. And, you know, we just give hints of that in the first issue. But I hope that Red Hood fans are really going to be along for the ride. So far, they've been awesome and really enthusiastic about what we've been doing. So.
All right, so it looks like our time is up. Is there anywhere you want to send people to find you on your social medias or your website?
Sure. I have a Twitter. I have all the social media things. I forget to use all of them, but I have a Twitter, which is Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS. That's probably the easiest place to find me. And I have a newsletter, which is Substack.Matthew Rosenberg or MatthewRosenberg.substack. I don't remember how it works, but it shouldn't be that hard to find. But you can find my Twitter. Oh, look at that. That's so helpful. That doesn't even look right to me, but I bet it is.
I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It was great talking with you. And don't forget to stick around, guys. Refresh that page so you can see what's coming up next.